Coptic Christians have been a part of Egyptian society since ancient times, but they've never felt more endangered. Since the revolution in 2011, thousands have fled to escape increasing sectarian violence. Now, Australia's top Coptic cleric has called on the government here to use its position on the UN Security Council to stand up for Egypt's largest religious minority.
Australia's Coptic Christians are on edge. The largely Egyptian community is worried about sectarian violence sweeping their country. The Arab Spring brought with it a new government led by the Muslim Brotherhood. Now they feel minorities are becoming increasingly unwelcome in their homeland. In April, 4 Copts were shot dead by an angry Muslim mob. Another 2 were killed during protests after the funerals. The Coptic Pope lashed out at President Mohamed Morsi after the violence, saying it was the president's negligence that caused it.
The Coptic community in Australia, which is 80,000 strong, are very, very concerned for their family and friends back in Egypt.
Australia's most senior Coptic cleric urging the government to use its newfound position in the United Nations to make a stand.
Since we have a position in the UN Security Council, to utilise this to bring the plight of the Copts to the attention of the world.
The Foreign Minister says he's following the situation in Egypt very closely. He says the first phone call he made when he was appointed last year was to Australia's ambassador in Cairo, urging him to get in touch with Coptic leaders.
I wanted them to know that Australia was taking a keen interest in their affairs, and I raised with President Morsi when I was in Egypt our concern with the treatment of the Copts.
Coptic leaders would like members of their community to have better access to Australia's refugee program, but Bob Carr says that's not the answer.
The real solution, given the restraint on the numbers anyone in the world can take, the real solution is to get a recognition of religious diversity in Egypt and see that minorities are protected in Egypt.
Despite reassurances from a number of world leaders, Egypt's Coptic Christians feel abandoned. Those that oppose them are growing in strength every day. They face violence and intimidation on a daily basis. And to make matters worse, it's a situation that doesn't look like improving, at least in the short term. Rami Tadros recently wrote a book about the plight of the Copts in Egypt. He says the new government, controlled by the Muslim Brotherhood, is allowing the oppression to happen.
Government's definitely abandoned the Copts. It's been increasing since the revolution.
Coptic advocates say Australian officials can help the situation by simply talking about it.
Whenever we can talk about it and raise awareness, I think that's always the first step. As long as the Muslim Brotherhood are in power, it's going to be bleak.
He says the only thing that will improve life for minorities in Egypt is the separation of religion and state, a prospect that at this stage at least seems unlikely. Sam Eichen, World News Australia.
It's now been more than 2 years since Japan was devastated by an earthquake and tsunami and then a nuclear reactor meltdown. By the time it was over, nearly 19,000 people had been killed. 160,000 fled their homes. It's now clear that Tokyo's promise that 54,000 people from 4 towns will be home by 2017 will not happen. They might never see their homes again.
Inside the evacuation zone, family homes, streets, entire villages abandoned. In this ghostly landscape, repair is futile inside the radiation area. Patrolling just offshore from the stricken reactors, a Japanese naval vessel preventing anyone getting too close. We're now just 10 miles or so up the coast from the plant. But what's this? Extreme angling. Local man Makoto Aota fishes here, even so. And catches. But lets them go.
Even if I take a fish home, we can't eat it.
But this is very dangerous to fish here. This is the most dangerous place in the world to fish.
I know that. But when it's hot, I go swimming here.
Heroic or crazy, the only person we found here had a need for normality in this utterly abnormal world. Random tsunami debris simply left more than 2 years ago. The whole town of Namia empty. Streets cordoned by police to prevent looting. Forlorn, derelict and overgrown JJ's in Namia is now a very long way from the perfect place for playing. Inside, tokens everywhere. They ran out of here in an earthquake 2 years ago. They're probably never coming back. Retired people like Yasuo Okubo begin to sense they will die exiled from their contaminated homes.
Where my house is, the radiation level is the highest. So I think it's 90% sure I will never be able to go back and live there.
English teachers Anthony Ballard and Philip Jellyman lived close to the reactors, but they decided to stay with the children they taught, living with them in exile.
Dog! Dog, 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 dog. Okay!
Living in exile hundreds of miles from the plant now, the head teacher describes Philip and Anthony as samurai.
I think it's important that the kids from Futaba have at least one familiar face around the school.
Out in the radiation zone, the remnants of family lives torn apart, an increasingly lost world. The banner that used to hang over Futaba's main street, the town where the reactors were built, reads, "Atomic power for a bright future." After the meltdown, the student who made the banner put up a new one. "Atomic power destroyed our future." Out in the ghost towns and the countryside of the radiation zone, the brand new radiation sensors are powered by, tellingly, solar panels. And by late afternoon every day, you are warned it's time to get out. The current decontamination of the Fukushima plant is due to last 40 years at least.
A wedding singer from a Palestinian refugee camp is the Middle East's latest singing sensation. Mohammed Asaf has just won Arab Idol. His patriotic songs about the Palestinian cause impressing millions of Arabs.
From student and wedding singer to superstar, Mohammed Asaf raised the hopes of the Palestinian people, and in the end, he followed through.
A revolution is not just the one carrying the rifle. A revolution is the paintbrush of an artist, the scalpel of a surgeon, the axe of the farmer.
A rare show of pride and national unity swept across the Palestinian territories. This was the scene in Gaza, crowds gathering to watch the results show.
The world needs to know we are a civilized people. Unlike what some say about us, we are a people who like art, evolution, democracy. Everything is beautiful.
And in the occupied West Bank city of Ramallah, people turned out in their thousands to cheer on the 23-year-old singer. He even caught the attention of the Palestinian diaspora with his selection of songs reflecting the loss of his homeland. Asaf grew up in the Khan Yunis refugee camp in Gaza, a tough place to live because it's been the scene of direct fighting with Israel. Ordinary life for Palestinians living in occupation made it quite difficult for Asaf to even make it to the audition. He says he had to beg Hamas to let him leave Gaza. Then he was forced to bribe his way through the Egyptian border to get to Lebanon, where the show is taped. Asaf then arrived to the recital hall too late for admissions. Another Palestinian contender apparently heard Asaf's voice and gave up his slot, handing Asaf what would become his ticket to stardom.
My feelings, I'm so overwhelmed. The feelings are so indescribable. The main feeling is pride. Pride for the Palestinian people, and proof to the world that the Palestinian people are alive.
After the results were revealed, he was surprised with a different honor. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency named Assaf a Goodwill Ambassador for Peace, becoming the first ever Palestinian to hold the title.
11 tourists in China's Jiangsu province got more than a thrill than they wanted when the roller coaster broke down mid-ride. The Sky Loop stopped suddenly 30 meters into its vertical ascent. Passengers were left staring at the midday sun for 2 hours. Emergency services were called to rescue the tourists, with fears that the car could plummet backwards down the track. Coming up next, Craig Foster with all the day sports news. And facing a serious charge, Wallabies captain James Horwill in danger of missing the second test after being cited for trampling. And young star rising, the 16-year-old putting Australia on the scoring sheet at the Under-20 World Cup.